There are two things that people struggle with the Pink Panther. The first is getting his proportions right, and it may help you to use some guidelines like this. If you see here where his hips go through and his tail joins onto his bottom, if I take that as it's pretty much a halfway mark. The top of his ears to that hip joint spot, and then from the hip joint down to his feet. That he bends at the hips, and that bends him exactly in half. You can see here the top of his ears is still on a par there, so actually this part of the body must be longer there because there's more of an angle than there is here, but his hips are sitting in exactly the same spot. So if you're trying to get his proportions correct, this is the thing to do, because it gives you a sense of where his elbow sits in relation to his hip, where his hand sits in relation to his hip, so that you can work all of those things out. The other thing to do is, the thing that people struggle with is getting these parallel lines on his very skinny limbs without crossing them over. And the suggestion that I have for you there, first of all, is to practice doing long skinny lines just like this as a warm-up. So just single lines, don't worry whether they cross or don't cross, just get a sense of what it feels like to do a long skinny line reasonably straight without too much wobbling around. The other thing that you can do is to do a quick trace just as a warm-up trace before you start sketching freehand and taking in the long lines. So let's do this and say, alright, I want to get a long line here without lifting my pencil, and get a feel for what the length of his limbs is. So you'll get a sense of that, and then that, and then this is that, and it's a continuous line all the way through down to the bottom of his foot. From this side it's a continuous line from there to there, and then you've got these two lines for his leg. So just by doing this and making that a continuous line as you sketch it, you're gaining muscle memory there, because you know when you're lifting your pencil and when you're not. So I would suggest that as a warm-up exercise. Just do the long lines, because that gives you a sense of how long are his legs actually, and that's something that people often struggle with, trying to get his proportions correct. So in summary, his proportions are half and half. Upper body from tip of ears to hip is half of his total height, so from hip to bottom of feet is the other half. Warm up with long straight lines, not to worry too much if they cross or don't cross. And then second warm up exercise, do these long lines in a single stretch. Let's change color here so that you can see what I'm doing, so that you get some muscle memory of how long his legs are. So if you take this line down here and this line down here, it just starts to give you a feel for how long his legs are, which helps again with proportions.